Hey everyone, how are we going today? Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Seamus and this is a novel review book podcast. If you're a returning customer, thank you so much for coming back. And if this is your first time, I do a different book every week. Today you are extra lucky because I'm doing the World Book Tour. Just a quick overview. Every month I'm going to travel, in inverted commas, to a different country and read 2 books from that country's canon of literature. The rules are pretty simple and I'm trying my best to adhere to them. Is trying to do one male, one female author, trying to find an author from that respective country that was born there, and then writing about that respective country. And then I explore the literature, see if I can see any similarities, any differences, anything like that. And it's just a way to sort of, I guess, spread my reading wings a bit and explore countries that maybe I haven't been to or traveled to or read literature from very widely. So today is leg 2, part 2 of Germany. The first month was Italy. Now I've got Germany. I'll be announcing where I'm going for March, which is the 3rd country on my list. Today is A Woman in Berlin, and it is technically anonymous. It was published anonymous, and that's what I mean when I say I'm trying my best to adhere to the rules of male and female authors. This one was written by a woman, and they are pretty certain they know who it is, of course, but she wanted the story to be published anonymously, so they respected those wishes, of course. And it's basically a story about her diary entries during the time 1945 when Russia sort of invades Berlin, and she's a German woman and what happens through those months. And she keeps a diary, and it's, to put it simply, absolutely harrowing. I'll get to that in a second. First, I just want to check in how we're doing. I hope everyone's got a nice cup of tea, cup of coffee, maybe something a little stronger. I don't know. Coffee here for me today. It's a bit of a grey day in London, and this morning I actually went to the Imperial War Museum, which was fantastic because really comprehensive view of the First and Second World War, free as well, which is always a plus, and you don't have to book a time slot as well. You can just literally walk up and walk in, which I absolutely love because it seems to be a growing trend in this post-COVID world that you have to book a specific time slot even if it's a free museum, which I don't really like. I just kind of like stumbling across a museum and rocking up and just going in. So I went there. I've been sort of on a World War II drive, I guess, doing Germany this month. It's it's a very pertinent topic for Germany and German history. And so I just really wanted to go to this museum and check it out, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I just thought I'd quickly plug that. They're not sponsoring this at all. Nothing like that. Also, if you would like to like and subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate that. It would be fantastic. Click the duck in the corner. Any support helps, so thank you so much for that. Cheers to you guys for listening and for giving me your attention. Okay, let's get into A Woman in Berlin now. So first of all, I just want to say that this is A Woman in Berlin. It was published by Virago Press. It's translated from German by Philip Bohm. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. And this particular edition was printed in 2011. I'll hold it up for the benefit of those on YouTube just so you can see the cover. Just want to put that out there because it is, of course, a translated book, as will majority of these books that I'm doing for the Book World Tour. They will mostly be translated books. So this is the diary of this woman. As I said sort of in the preview, I sort of already gave an overview of what the story was about, but it's her diary entries from the 20th of April 1945 to the 22nd of June 1945. So it covers a really kind of condensed period of time. And as I said, it's the period when the Russians come in and sort of take over Berlin, and it's really the end of the war. And during these months, actually, Hitler, that's when he hangs himself, when he kills himself. And there's actually not too much of a mention about that in this particular book, in this story. It's really a story about the people living in Berlin at the time, the people suffering through this sort of now post-war Berlin, and the effects of being in a post-war Berlin or losing a world war, I guess, in essence. So, I mean, where do we even begin with a story like this? It was absolutely harrowing. I think I should actually start with a quote, and the quote here is from the editor, the original German editor. And the quote, he's got a complete afterword by the German editor, and he says he respected her wishes, didn't want to have it published. It goes through all this stuff, but there's this really nice, I think this really kind of sums up what this world is like, because obviously Russians are on the winning side, as were the English and the Americans, and that's sort of the side we all want to be on, isn't it? The winning side. And I think everyone is generally pretty happy that we won the war, that Germany was defeated. But then you read a story like this, and I mean, it's just completely harrowing. And I think he sums it up, the German editor sums it up pretty much in 2 words here. He says it was a complete moral breakdown. And the reason it's a complete moral breakdown is this woman is living in Berlin, and obviously the Russians come through, and what happens from there is they are treated pretty much as spoils of war. And I mean, I think I should almost give a preface to this book. Do not read it if you are, I was going to say, if you're squeamish or something like that. It's not even that, but there is a copious amount of rape in this book, and it's violent, it's graphic, it's not pleasant, it's not enjoyable, and it's a really tough read because it is a true account, it is someone's true diary entries, and it's not something they're reflecting back on retrospectively. It's something that they're writing in the moment as well, which I think gives it that a bit more of a harrowing edge, I guess, to know that these are sort of the immediate thoughts of suffering through these absolute atrocities of war. And it's not just 1 rape or 2 rapes. It's at one point she's being raped multiple times a day, which is, just incredibly distressing to read. So I'd say that if that's probably a little distressing note to put at the front of this book. It is an incredibly tough, it's an incredibly honest read. It really captures what it was like in those periods. And if that is not something you want to read, then that is completely fine. I would not encourage it. Naturally, throughout the story, I feel incredibly sorry for this woman and all the people surrounding her as well, because there are multiple women that are raped in this book, and the men are sort of helpless as well. And it's just this really ugly scene of, just like the German editor says, it's just this complete moral breakdown of what humanity is. And, I think naturally I felt a bit conflicted at times, because in this book I found it interesting. She never condemns Hitler for his actions. There's a few mentions of Hitler and sort of what's gone on in the war. And they'll say something like, oh, damn Hitler for losing this war. But you never know what point of view she's taking in this. You never know if it's a damn Hitler for losing this war because we were on your side and we really wanted you to win, or if it's a damn Hitler, you lost this war and you were a terrible, terrible person. There's sort of never the anonymous speaker of this story never kind of chooses a side, and I don't know if that's intentional, that she doesn't want to choose a side because maybe she's on a side that we would now condemn more harshly and I guess judge her more harshly for that. But I found that really interesting, that there's never sort of a distinction or at least a clear distinction to the allegiances. And, this is 1945. It's not the start of the war where this ideological programming has really taken root and the German people might not be fully aware of what's being sort of perpetrated in the wider world. In 1945, it's pretty well known what Germany's doing, and a lot of German people would have known what they're doing and what they've been a part of. So I found it really interesting that she didn't outwardly take a side. I do also want to say, though, that I think that is just the benefit of hindsight, reading this, 70, 80 years later, that it's so easy to just judge and take a moral stance on this and sort of condemn her for those actions, because I can't imagine what it would be like to live through something like that and, be able to keep a rational thought going. And the fact that she even kept the diary going and was able to keep it hidden and sort of captured what it's like to lose a war, but also sort of survive in a post-war period, I think is really important, because as much as you want to win the war, you wanted the Germans to lose this war, you also don't want this absolute atrocity to follow, which is, copious amounts of rape and just the complete moral breakdown, which I think is just going to be the perfect way to sum up something like this. So I've got a quote here that I want to read, and I think this sort of captures, again, maybe it's too hard to judge from this far gone, even though it's really not that far gone from it, but this far gone from our position of now understanding all the facts and understanding exactly what was going on, because this could be still a result of propaganda. We are still technically in the war, but there's this one moment that I just want to read to you where it's this woman's complete ignorance to everything that's going on. And basically these Russians have come in and they're having conversations with some of these German people, this woman and some of the other women as well. And this German boy, this 18-year-old, is sort of discussing this young 18-year-old Russian boy is sort of discussing some of the atrocities that he's seen and some of the atrocities that the Germans perpetrated. And one woman speaks up and says, I don't believe it, answers Frau Lehmann. Our soldiers, my husband, never. And it's just kind of like that moment of ignorance where it's like, is this just a result of propaganda? Do you truly still believe that evil things haven't gone on? Or is it just kind of like that natural defense of, my husband could never do that because he's a good man and I know him? And, it's kind of like there's almost two complete breakdowns there of, On one hand, it's like, have you just suffered propaganda? Have you been brought up in this ideological programmed world so fervently that you can't possibly perceive that you did something wrong? Or is it just like that complete, defense of your husband because you truly believe he is a good man, even though that anyone in this situation would have got swept up in the tide of complete atrocities and perpetrated these acts as well? Like, I think it's really important to remember that when you're reading stories like this, is we always think ourselves better than everyone else, and we always think we would never do that. And that the vast majority of people in this war would have done acts that are just completely a complete moral breakdown to what they might have believed before and after the war. It was just an ugly, ugly time where people did terrible, terrible things. And so it's interesting to me that there's still that ignorance there, even right at the end, even hearing firsthand that really, really evil things have gone on. And I found that kind of interesting. Something I found myself sort of really thinking about while reading this was the nature of trauma and how, I guess, humans navigate trauma and how they develop trauma as well. Because this woman, as I said, she's raped multiple times a day at times, and it's sort of a daily occurrence, and one rape is more than enough to give you lifelong trauma. But it's kind of like this nature of trauma just seems to be almost offset at this moment, in these moments of complete austerity that she's living through. She almost seems to be able to, and in fact a lot of these women suffering through this seem to be able to almost offset trauma into this kind of collective struggle that they're going through. And it's kind of like this nature. I was wondering, is trauma the kind of, I'm not going to say benefit of the survivor, but I think I mean the meaning behind benefit. Like, can you only really suffer trauma if you manage to survive the thing itself? Because they just seem to be able to keep going and keep struggling through this complete moral breakdown of society and societal expectations. And they seem to be able to really abstract themselves from the acts and what's going on in their lives, and be able to abstract themselves and carry on living as best they can. And I mean, we never see what happens past these few months, because I imagine there was just a complete development of trauma and everything that accompanies that. But in this moment, she seems to really be able to just carry on with her life, which I found really kind of inspiring. And, that sort of brought me to this great quote. I mean, it's not really a great quote, but it's kind of, this woman's just been raped and she comes back in, and, she's been, it's not just one rape, she's been gang raped by these 2 or 3 guys. And she comes in and she sits down and she says, "So that's what I spent 7 years waiting for?" And she kind of has this momentary humorous response to this completely abhorrent act that she suffered through. And all these women sort of share a giggle, and it's kind of like this nature of being a part of something, and in this case, being a part of these group of women and being able to joke at the situation seems to really be a really great coping mechanism. And it made me think that humor is really just such a great coping mechanism. Like, if you can laugh at a situation, you can really take a lot of the power away from it. And just the way that humor was utilized through this book and in these incredibly dark moments to sort of help put up a bit of a shield and to help abstract themselves that little bit further. And, if you can share a laugh about your own situation with women that have been through this same situation, then you're gaining that little bit of victory over that moment. And you understand that you're now a part of like a little community, I guess. And it's kind of the nature of, there's a complete moral breakdown going outside, but inside we're a little community of people that are just going to continue striving through these really, really dark times. The last quote I kind of want to read that really sort of, I guess, piqued my interest was this quote about man and being a man in this world, and being a German man in this world. So I'll read the quote and then I'll talk about it a bit. "These days, I keep noticing how my feelings towards men and the feelings of all the other women are changing. We feel sorry for them. They seem so miserable and powerless. The weaker sex. Deep down, we women are experiencing a kind of collective disappointment. The Nazi world, ruled by men, glorifying the strong man, is beginning to crumble, and with it the myth of man. In earlier wars, men could claim that the privilege of killing and being killed for the fatherland was theirs and theirs alone. Today, we women too have a share. That has transformed us, emboldened us. Among the many defeats at the end of this war is the defeat of the male sex." And I found that a really interesting quote to read and sort of reflect on, because it's sort of capturing this complete failure of man and the decline of man, as they say in that quote. And I found it really interesting because it's almost like an ironic passage in that previous to this war, World War I sort of really started to change the narrative a bit, but previous to World War II, there was still this, I guess it was still faint, but there was still an idea of sort of honor in war. And like they said, there used to be honor in going off and dying for your country. And it used to be this really honorable thing. And I think that kind of changes a lot in World War I, but it's really World War II where it is just completely shattered, and all kind of morals and honor are just completely gone, and men are just completely debased and forced to do things that are just well beyond the capabilities, or should be beyond the capabilities of men. And I found it, I guess, kind of ironic because it's the Nazis that actually perpetrate this and sort of really shatter this illusion of war being this honorific kind of thing that you can go off and fight for your homeland, and it's really kind of like a really honorable thing to do. And the Nazis just completely shatter that. And now this woman's kind of capturing how these men have come back and they're just completely ruined, and they've been completely debased beyond all levels of humanity, and they've been forced to do things and to witness things and participate in things that have just completely destroyed them as men, and now they don't even see the honor in living and in dying. So I found it kind of like a bit of an ironic passage for that reason, because it's the Germans that really perpetrate this, and now she's looking at them and going, there used to be privilege and honor among these guys. And, I just found like a really interesting passage to sort of read and reflect on. So I don't know. That was my reading of A Woman in Berlin by Anonymous. It's a really powerful book. It's a really frightening book. It's a really dark and I mean, I absolutely, like, in terms of reading, I really enjoyed it. I probably smashed through it's 300 pages. I probably read the first 150 pages in like 2 days. The next 50 pages really started to drag, not because the story itself is dragging, but because it's a diary and it's told on a day-by-day basis. It's just kind of like, wake up, bad things happen, go to sleep, wake up, bad things happen. And so by page 200, I was like really kind of struggling to just read it. I can't even imagine what it must have been like to live through this. And then the last 100 pages were a bit of a struggle for that reason, because it just became tireless and relentless and abhorrent and criminal and frightening, and it was just really, really dark to read. So, with the Italian books that I did, I kind of sort of summed up the similarities, and I don't think there's too many similarities in these two books about, I guess, the writing style or anything like that I noticed, but I did write a little passage that I wanted to read out because I thought it better to write something down. This is an incredibly serious topic. Both books were about World War II and Nazi Germany. So I wrote down a little passage that I wanted to capture that I noticed between these books. And I'm going to read that now because that's sort of, I think, the best way. In fact, I might first say this book, I think, is a 4.5 out of 5 because I think everyone should read it. It's a harrowing read, but I think if you're up for it and want to put yourself through that kind of like watching that moral decline and complete debasement of human morals, then check it out. So this is my little passage. There is something within these stories that I cannot escape, that human quality that defines us. Conflicted, I feel sorry for the young boys in I Was There, for the life and lies they were sold into becoming Nazis. I feel sorry for the women and men in Berlin at the time of the novel A Woman in Berlin, who had participated in the German war machine that had scarred the face of the world and redefined the 20th century. It would be easy to cast these stories away full of blame and scorn because of the result, because of the war and the camps and the hatred that still permeates society today. It would be easy to not forgive and not care how these boys were raised before the war and not care how these women were treated after. To abstract these people from society and our world as a kind of freak force of evil, but this is a morally apathetic view to hold. I couldn't help but feel sorry for them, and that conflicted me because, by all accounts, they were guilty. I felt sorry for humanity, for the lives that were lost to an idea before the first bullet had been fired, to those who realized the truth too late that they were now guilty of crimes they had been told were victories. We have to, with these stories, as with all human history, remember a fundamental truth. These abhorrent crimes were committed by humans, by simply flesh and blood. To abstract this evil time and people as simply being an evil time and people is to remove it, and to remove it is to remove responsibility. This great darkness that defined the 20th century will only happen again if we believe that those who committed these atrocities were somehow different from us today. These were the actions of humans, and we have to recognize that so we can trace those threads when evil comes and stamp out hatred before it corrupts the innocent. So that was Germany for the World Book Tour. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was good. I hope you got something out of it. But now to the next month. Where am I going? Where am I jet setting off to? I am off to Chile. I've got 2 books here, and unfortunately at the start of the episode I did say I was trying my best to stick to the rules that I had created, and it's actually going to be broken this month for 2 reasons. One, a friend gave me this book and I thought it was by a male author. I don't know why, I just got in my head that it was by a male author. So then I found a female author. Turns out both female. But given how difficult it's been to find female authors in other countries, and it's really difficult to find a female author in Germany as well, I'm fine having 2 female authors. Although I was flicking through this book yesterday, this first one by Isabel Allende, The House of the Spirits. She was actually born in Peru and lived there for the first 2 years of her life before moving to Chile. So I've given myself a pass there as well, because she then grew up in Chile and she's known as a Chilean-American writer. So that is the first book, Isabel Allende's The House of the Spirits. I'm really looking forward to that one. It's a nice, big, chunky book, and I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to really sort of delve into society in a way that I'm interested in a way that I'm trying to explore through this book world tour. The second book is by Nona Fernandez. It's called Space Invaders, a really, really small book, which I'm also excited for because I've got a few big books on the horizon. So having a nice thin book is always a victory. It's so thin, in fact, that I've already read it, and I read it in one session. It's only like 80 pages long, but it's really cool. It sort of flips between sort of history and memory. It's a story about history and memory, and dealing with with Pinochet and stuff like that. So really, really cool. It was a really nice book. Really excited by this month, Chile. So yeah, hang around. Next month is going to be Chile, and we are jet setting off to these 2 books. So if you have listened this far, thank you so much for paying attention. I really do appreciate it. Please feel free to click the duck in the corner. If you're a fan of books, you should be liking and subscribing, so do that and give me a 5-star review. I'd also greatly, greatly appreciate that. So to take us away, I think a quote, the opening testimonial from Nona Fernandez, Space Invaders, because we are heading off to Chile. And it goes like this. I am at the mercy of this dream. I know it's just a dream, but I can't escape it.